previous Indian Riverkeeper. He has worked for the Division of Recreation and Parks. He has worked for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. He also has stood as a ranger, an assistant park manager, a park manager, and a Bureau of Chiefs. Presently, he is an active member of ORCA, the Ocean Research and Conservation Association. Please help me welcome Mr. George Jones.
I don't know how I can follow two great Riverkeeper speakers, but I'm going to give it a shot here. My main emphasis is to thank everybody, for all the support. When I left and Marty took over, we didn't have a lot of discharges. I was working down in Broward, and the sort of proverbial you-know-what hit the fan, and everything started going on. And one of the most encouraging things to me is when I came sort of back up and started getting back involved is the people that were in their 30s and 40s and 20s and the kids and whatever. As Kevin stated earlier, I've been doing this a long time, and when you look back historically, I was around in the 80s when Florida Bay turned green at John Pennekamp as the park manager. I've been involved with discharges when C-111, they pulled the plug down there. That's the beginning of Mod Waters before there was a SERP project. So resource restoration takes a long time. It's not something that happens overnight, but it takes really seriously dedicated people to put in the long haul. This is not something that's this isn't a sprint. This is a real endurance race for those that have been around a long time. I was very fortunate this past week to get up in the floodplain of the Kissimmee during some of the restoration work and to get out on that floodplain with Paul Gray, Dr. Paul Gray. We talked about the history of that project, and it's 40 years in the making. It's still 8 years from being done, the final section. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I'll see a lot of the restoration, but I'm not patient enough to wait around for some of this stuff, and it really takes political will. And you folks have really bent political will in the last couple of years. And I'm going to tell you, that's what it takes to move these things forward. And when you hear we can only do this, or we can only do that, we can do anything we darn well believe we can do, and anything we force the politicians into doing. And so it's important to have folks out here registering to vote. It's important to have historical perspective. Some of this stuff doesn't happen overnight. Some of it will take some time. But the more pressure we put on those that are supposed to be representing us in both the Department of Environmental Protection or NOAA or any other organization that's out there, and it takes people like Marty Baum, it takes people like Riverkeeper organizations, but it takes the private citizens of this area, the lagoon, but it also takes the private citizens of the state of Florida. There's now 6 keeper programs in the state of Florida. There soon, hopefully, will be a few more. That's what it takes. It's a grassroots movement, but it takes youth also. I can tell you that I felt really disillusioned. I was one of those 70s folks that said, God, we had an Earth Day. Look what we're going to do. And we proceeded to go do a lot of stuff, but we didn't educate anybody behind us. We have about 2 generations gap. So when I start looking at River Kids and I start seeing what Katie Louie is doing, I look at Jim Offenborn standing over there. I call him the hardest working man, maybe besides Commissioner Zadofsky in St. Lucie County. Those 2 guys are doing it. They're out there, but they're doing it with the citizens of this county and the other counties around the lagoon. They're doing it with the kids. They're out there bagging oysters and putting them out there. They're at meetings. They're showing up and doing. That's the important and that's the enthusiastic part to somebody like me that's been doing this for 40 years. I'm an old curmudgeon, you know. I'm one of these kind of guys that kind of looks around and says, yeah, you know, I've seen that, been there, done that. I'm invigorated. If you can get an old, you-know-what like me invigorated, then you guys are really moving on. But I'm just telling you, that's the exciting part of what's going. Marty needs the community support. The Riverkeeper needs the community support, but the lagoon needs all of your support. It's going to take all the organizations pushing on the political agendas and the political machines that are out there. And if you don't think there's an organized opposition, then think again. Because I've been watching it for 40 years, and I've been behind the curtain at Oz, and it's not a pretty picture. I've been on both sides of that fence. I've worked with the Department of Environmental Protection clear up to the level where I manage all the state parks from Fort Pierce to Key West and over to Lake Okeechobee. If you don't think there's a lot of politics involved in that operation, think again. You have to be able to maneuver a really, really muddy field. What makes it easy and what makes it a lot more tolerable is when you have the political will of the group of people that you're fighting for. State Parks has always had huge support. The Indian River now has huge support. Don't let it slip away. The rally when you guys showed up with 2,000 people last month, big digs, no releases. We still got huge problems with our own basins. Don't let that slip out of sight. When they tell you we can only do this, we can only move water south, but we can't deal with our basins, don't accept that. It's terribly important we move water south. It's also terribly important we keep the pressure on to get our basins cleaned up, that we keep the pressure on DEP to do enforcement, which they haven't been doing. It's terribly important that we push that political agenda right off the cliff. And if they won't do it, put somebody else in office that will. It might take us 5 or 6 election cycles, but get rid of the folks that don't support what we support. Make them gone.